You know a lot about the human brain.
Well, I know a little bit, but yes, I'm happy to help you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Alright, my first question is, how does the human brain store information from the past?
Well, it stores it in what we call memory, and we actually don't know the full way. So the big answer is we actually don't know.
Oh, okay.
So one thing that people believe is that experience changes the connections among neurons, and those changes in connections, which are called synaptic connections, somehow represent the past inside our brains. But we actually don't know much about the details. We know some aspects of that, but some people really believe that, some scientists, some don't. And it's a big open question, but that's what we think. Experience changes the connections of the brain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So neurons do have a lot to do with that? And
Yes, that's what we believe. Neurons and their connections with each other, we believe, form memory.
Okay. And so, do neurons die then? And when neurons die, what happens to the memory?
Well, we have a certain number of neurons at birth, and we create new neurons in the early years of life, like your age. How old are you?
10.
You're 10. So you're creating new neurons, but you actually will mostly be creating new connections from this time forward. But there are areas of the brain, an area called the hippocampus, that seems to grow new neurons throughout the lifespan, but we're always growing new connections all around the brain. Those are called synaptic connections. A synapse is a connection between two neurons, and the way we remember things, as we mentioned, is through synaptic connections, and those you make throughout the lifespan.
Okay. Are there like diseases that where the neurons die, like Alzheimer's disease?
Yes, there are diseases like Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia where the connections among the neurons die and the neurons themselves can die. And that can happen with poisons. It can happen, with drugs people take. It can happen with toxins people are exposed to, like lead. It can happen with injuries to the brain, like getting your head hit. It can happen even with malnutrition. So there are lots of ways where we want to really protect our brains as best we can.
All right. But so I've heard that in Alzheimer's disease, that's why you forget many things, and maybe those neurons, since they're dying, they held a part of your memory, and that's why you're forgetting.
Yeah, so it's not so much the neurons as the connections among the neurons that store, it's the connections between neurons that store memories, and you start to lose the connections. And they get stuff, inflammation in the brain. Like, if you fall down, you get your skin irritated, you get an irritated brain, and that's one of the things we think is causing Alzheimer's. Inflammation in the brain.
Is there a difference in the neurons with the female's brain and the male's brain and the connections?
Well, there are books written in both directions. One book claims there's a difference between a male and a female brain. Two other books, which I really believe in, say there really aren't the differences, but culture can create differences in brains. So, for example, if a female is always told she cannot do math or science, her brain may come to believe that, when in fact it's not a female brain, it's just she's been lied to. So the lies that culture puts on you can make you believe the lie. So my daughter, for example, in our family, we always told her she could do anything a boy can do. So when she was in volleyball in high school, and all of her volleyball friends said, "Why are you in advanced calculus, advanced math?" She said, "Because I like it." And they said, "Girls can't do that." And she said, "Yes, they can." And she did. Now, maybe they couldn't because they didn't believe they could. So your beliefs shape your brain, and your brain shapes your belief, and that's shaped by the message you get from your family, from your friends, from your teachers, from social media, from culture. And so we have to be very careful when books are written saying, oh, there's the female brain. It looks like from the science what I think is true, what these books say. There's a book by Lise Elliott called Pink Brain, Blue Brain. It looks like most of the differences between male and female brains are actually created by culture.
So that's interesting then.
Yeah.
And about, like, I've read in some places that the female brain is around 10% smaller than the male brain, or it has some shaping differences with other centers. Does that affect anything?
You know, there may be subtle differences in the brains, but if you showed me a scan of a person, I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's a female or male brain. You've got to give me, 500 brains, and then you see these averages. So when you see people say, oh, the brains are different, one of the general things they say is female brains are maybe a little more communicating within themselves, and male brains are a little more separate. That's pretty much the extent to it, but I don't take that too seriously.
All right, and now on nerves, like, there is a set of nerves coming from your body parts to your brain.
Yep.
And the body parts send the information to the brain. How exactly does that work through the nerves?
That works through electrochemical signals. So you have like the equivalent of ions, charged particles, going in and out of the membrane of a neuron. That's like an electrical charge going down a wire. When it gets to the end, it releases a neurotransmitter, a chemical, and the release of that chemical communicates with the next neuron. And that's how it happens.
And yeah, so it goes back and forth through both nerves that way? That's
right. It goes all the way up into the brain.
And is there a specific amount of ions?
Ions, yeah, charged little atoms, yeah.
Is there a specific number of them?
Well, yes. I mean, there's sodium and there's potassium. And there's all sorts of ions that are, some are negative charge, some are positive charge, and the balance of them is what the electrical flow is like. And there's many of them, millions and millions and millions of them that go in and
out. And so, yeah. And so that's how the brain and the body parts get the exact thing. What if one of those nerves were to, get torn or not work properly?
Yeah, then the signal wouldn't get there.
And so it would be kind of faulted?
Yeah, so like if you got an arm injury and the nerve was broken, or a back injury, then you might not feel an arm or be able to move an arm or something like that. So that's why it's important to wear your safety belt in a car or wear a helmet when you play a game or riding a bicycle, because you don't want the nerves to get torn and damaged.
And like through the nerves, is there do the nerves do more than just like tell your brain stuff? Do like they send the senses up to your brain, and the brain tells its decision to perform an action? But how does the brain bring back memory from the past experiences to make the decision?
Yeah, well, that is a really great question. Good questions, Ria. And that's a whole field called cognitive neuroscience. How does a brain make decisions? And it's believed that in the brain, in the head, is like a spider web set of connections that is thought to be the most complex thing in the universe in your head. You have about 100 billion neurons. Each neuron has an average of 10,000 synaptic connections, which means there are trillions of connections. And the number of on-off firing patterns is thought to be larger than the particles, the atoms in the known universe. So there's something about the firing patterns that create codes that include memory and emotion and meaning and stories and reading what's happening in the environment